It's been a busy couple of weeks, but I wanted to follow up my review of the Viltrox 75mm f1.2 with a full-fledged comparison to the Sigma 56mm f1.4. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time. In fact, I'm not going to spend any time going over the physical characteristics of these two lenses, but what I wanted to do is see how these two perform side by side. So I had the opportunity to take a bunch of sample photos with my wife and a bunch of portrait photos really recently on a trip, so let's jump straight into that. First one, both lenses wide open with some backlight, and this is the same distance to Janessa, so you can see just what the framing difference looks like. Punch in and there's no difference in my opinion in terms of sharpness. Colors and contrast look about the same even though this is f1.2 versus f1.4. Next up, let's look at some corners just for fun. Both lenses wide open. Obviously the centers are nice and sharp and the corners are, well, more of the same. I would argue that the Viltrox is even sharper here, although it's not entirely a fair comparison as this is a flat building, but my angle of shot is not direct. And because the Sigma is wider, those corners are moved further from the focal plane. The Viltrox does have a noticeable vignette here wide open, and the Sigma doesn't have much of one. Next shot, both wide open. I moved a few feet forward with the Sigma to get the same perspective, and you can see immediately that the 75mm you get more compression of the background, which is awesome. The bokeh is just super smooth. Now this is one of 3 shots in which the Viltrox missed focus, so I can't talk about sharpness in this shot unfortunately, but the difference in background out of focus area is interesting nonetheless. Alright, next shot is stopped down to f2. Here is the perspective without walking forward on the 56mm, and here it is with a somewhat equal perspective. Here in terms of sharpness, there is nothing to really talk about. The Sigma is warmer, the Viltrox looks more natural, so I do prefer the shot from the Viltrox. Next up, wide open again, and what's interesting here is the background. With telephoto lenses, you bring the background closer to the subject, and you can see with the Sigma 56 here, even though I am stepping a few feet closer to Janessa, the building in the background appears to be further away. You zoom in and there is a difference in bokeh smoothness and size as well, but as you look at the face, there's really no difference in terms of sharpness. I will say that in this one, the Viltrox has a bit of a color pop and I quite like it. The Sigma looks a little flatter in my opinion. And maybe it's just me, but I'm noticing that Janessa's face looks a little more narrow with the 75mm, which again is a positive thing in most cases. Next shot is wide open, same distance to the subject. I wanted to show the difference in bokeh size and it's drastic. Both lenses have cat-eye bokeh, but the Viltrox's is much larger. Getting into a little bit of low light here, both wide open. The sharpness difference is so slight that it is negligible, which is astonishing because I never thought we'd get a lens that keeps up with the Sigma apart from perhaps another Sigma, but here we are. Next up, wide open, ISO 2000. Again, another misfocus from the Viltrox. It's slight, but unfortunate. And at night, wide open, you can see that these lenses perform similarly. The Sigma has to do 1/20 instead of 1/25 to make up for that f1.4, but zooming in, the Viltrox looks much better overall. Contrasty, sharp, it's really good. All right, I've got some more portraits here. If you guys haven't been to Florida, you won't understand humidity. I struggled for about 20 minutes trying to get these lenses not to fog up, and as you can tell, I failed a bit. The Sigma in this case is foggy, and so the contrast levels are not quite equal. Next up, this is the shot. This is the one that made me realize just how good the Viltrox is. Both lenses are at f1.4 with the exact same settings, no adjustments. Look at how punchy and contrasty the Viltrox looks. It honestly looks incredibly good. Both lenses are equally sharp, but the combination of that higher contrast, that closer, blurrier background, and the slightly narrower face make the Viltrox stand out. Okay, next one, f2, and this is the third misfocused photo from the Viltrox. It's slight, but it is out of focus. And mind you, I do these shots on a tripod. Janessa is an expert at staying still, so there is little room for error, and I took twice as many shots with the Sigma because I was stepping forward a bit to match the composition, and the Sigma did not miss a beat. Not a single photo was out of focus that I noticed. All right, last up, these are at f1.8, and you get a little bit of foreground bokeh, and in terms of sharpness, again, there's no real difference. Colors look identical. The Viltrox is a touch more contrasty, and the background compression does make it look a little nicer in my opinion. All right, so after all of that, what is the conclusion? And this is kind of a tough one because the Viltrox is very, very good. In fact, if you look at side-by-side images, I would argue that in most cases, the Viltrox image looks better. It's just, there's something about it. It pops a little bit more, has a little bit more contrast. The backgrounds are pulled closer in. There's more of that compression. It just makes the face a little bit nicer looking. I think it's more flattering for most people. So I think as an ultimate portrait lens, the Viltrox is probably about as good as it gets and when it comes to APS-C portrait lenses. Now, it's nowhere near as reliable when it comes to autofocus. And I mentioned that in my review that sometimes it would waver a little bit. It wasn't the most confident when it came to autofocus performance. This lens does have a USB-C port at the bottom on the mount, which I didn't mention in this video, but I did mention in the review. And that means that in the future, this lens will be updated via firmware and they can improve autofocus performance. So ultimately, what I would say is that if you're looking for a reliable, sharp, excellent portrait lens that's compact, easy to carry around, just throw in your bag, the Sigma 56 is still the best that you can get, and it's less expensive than this Viltrox as well. However, if you are a portrait photographer, if you take portraits for payments, if people pay you to take senior pictures, for example, and you're using an APS-C camera, then this Viltrox is definitely worth picking up. Yes, every once in a while it does slightly miss focus, but the result on, let's say, the 90% of photos that are in focus are ever so slightly even better than the Sigma, and that background compression really gets you a full frame looking image out of an APS-C camera, and that is truly impressive. So this is a lens that for me is definitely going to stay in my collection for a little bit, maybe for a long time, we'll see, but I've enjoyed using it, and so I would definitely recommend checking it out. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. Let me know what you thought as far as which one performed better than the other. Always curious to read your guys' comments. Thank you so much for all of your comments, all of your likes, and your support. Stay tuned for more. A lot of good videos coming up very shortly. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.